Good morning. Well, of course, let's bring you the latest now on the budget. We understand President Cyril Ramaphosa leading the final cabinet meeting this morning, trying to ensure that all of the political parties involved in the national coalition have come to some kind of agreement before the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana gives his speech, well, scheduled now for the second time for 2 o'clock this afternoon. You will, of course, see that speech and what happens in Parliament right here. Let's update you now on the situation in Parliament itself. Newzroom Afrika's Ziyanda Ngcobo joins you now live from Cape Town, from the parliamentary precinct. Ziyanda, good morning to you. A lot of expectation and anticipation ahead of this afternoon. What are political parties outside the national coalition saying about what's happening today?
Well, that's exactly what we're going to try and find out, Stephen, because, of course, they would not be represented in that cabinet meeting that is currently underway. You'll know that in the leaked budget speech, there was a 2 percentage point VAT hike. We understand that that will be significantly smaller. But let's bring in the ACDP's Mr. Steven Swart and Bosses Musi Maimane to talk about this. And thank you to both of you. You're not in the GNU. You're not represented in that meeting. What is the position of the ACDP as it stands? And I mean, lots of talk about our public spending needing to be reduced and SARS needing to be better capacitated, but more importantly, the public confidence in the way in which our public purse is managed.
No, absolutely. And taxpayers are demanding better value for all the taxes they are paid. And therefore, when we look now, we see renewed power outages, we see water crises, we see logistics crises, we see dysfunctional municipalities. Taxpayers are not getting the value for their money, and they are demanding better accountability. From our perspective, we cannot justify any VAT increase. We believe that there is other space to save. For example, SARS can collect 800 billion rand if they are given the additional resources. Even 10% of that will cover the 60 billion rand shortfall. And as you know, the ACDP has always said, give the SIU, give the NPA, give the Hawks additional resources. They can collect the tens of billions of rands that were stolen through state capture and corruption that is sitting in overseas bank accounts. And lastly, we would say there are some items that we cannot afford, such as the NHI. That must be postponed. We are opposed to that in totality, but it is unaffordable. And some elements of the Bella Act, such as the early childhood development, that's 7 billion rand a year. Surely that can also be postponed so that we can at first balance our books, have fiscal consolidation, so we're not spending the billions of rands, that's 1 billion rand per day, just on debt service costs. Totally unaffordable and unsustainable.
I mean, 22 cents per rand that we're paying back, Mr. Maimane, but 60 billion rand needs to be found from somewhere. What do you say from an optics perspective, what many have deemed as a threat by our Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana to say, well, I'm increasing the VAT to fund the social relief distress grants?
You are increasing the VAT to pay for state capture. You are increasing the VAT. You are punishing people whose money was stolen, again, by saying you must increase their tax. That's what this is. It's not about saying you increase the VAT to fund the SRD. There are other ways to cut, as my colleagues have already spoken. I identified 60 billion rands in where the cuts are. It's about merging agencies. It's about ensuring that you halve the cabinet. It's about stopping some of the SOE bailouts. It's about ensuring that you build efficiency into your budget. And ultimately, no one has ever taxed themselves to prosperity. It's about funding for growth, and that's focused on infrastructure. And if you do that well enough, you'll be able to, in the medium term, overcome the shortfall and create better conditions for employment. On the SRD, I do think it's a policy choice, right? We are at a point now where we're not making good and bad choices. We're making worse and much worse choices. And so if you are choosing within that space, if I was to suspend the SRD grant, I would translate some of that revenue, or at least some of that saving, into an extended public works program so that people can be able to align it to work and compensation in that regard. That is one route. But again, you have to make that policy choice.
But sorry, can I jump in there? But you still need the money to fund that, right? Because it's not like you're going to pay those EPWP workers 350 rand, which is where the SRD grant stands.
No, it's when I talk about funding it, it obviously comes from the savings you would accrue by doing an expenditure cut the elimination of what the Auditor General describes as 52 billion rands of wasteful and fruitless expenditure within municipalities, if you capacitate those municipalities better. If you are going to spend on infrastructure, which has already been budgeted for in the current budget framework, you can use some of that money by simply doing a rail revitalization process. That has economic spin-offs, it's infrastructure build, but then you align it to expanded public works. So I don't think South Africa's problem is about trying to tax people more. It's actually about policy choices. It's about ensuring that you cut expenditure that's wasteful. And more than anything, it's about avoiding a budget blowout, because already in the budget there's a 5% deficit. We cannot afford to just keep spending and hoping that in the end we'll be able to achieve economic growth.
Bad policies there, according to Mr. Maimane, causing, contributing towards this crisis. You're both not in the GNU. Let's talk about how you as an opposition are perhaps, organizing yourselves outside of this, because, there's lots of talk that maybe the ANC is flirting now with the EFF and MK party, and you also have a responsibility as opposition parties to ensure that the best interests of the country are always top of mind.
Well, we definitely are speaking to parties such as BOSA, such as Action South Africa, in setting up a centrist, constructive opposition role. Remember, there's a need for accountability, and my colleague chairs the committees of appropriations, doing excellent work there, and I think there's a definite centrist role now that can play, not just the breakers on the left, but a centrist role of parties that holds the GNU accountable. So when it comes to policies and when it comes to issues such as low economic growth that my colleague referred to, 0.6%, we're going to get nowhere there. But what is the main and what makes it even worse is the fact that we might have AGOA and the US trade war existing, which will impact our exports even more. And that is directly accountable to the ANC for its foreign policy issues, which has affronted the US, and now we've got problems there. These issues, foreign policy, need to be sorted out quickly to avoid even further economic growth problems that we are faced with and escalating debt. So we think there is definite space for us to play that role of constructive opposition.
Just very quickly, Mr. Maimane, do you believe that the president will be able to get that consensus? It's been quite the journey. And of course, many have said, maybe the finance minister was a bit arrogant in his approach. This is the era that we live in, coalition politics.
Absolutely. But what keeps coalitions to survive is a tangible plan. A statement of intent isn't a plan. A State of the Nation address this year didn't give us a plan. What we need as a country is a plan all sectors of society can rally behind. Because once you achieve that, you can then tell people, here's how we grow, and here are the sacrifices we have to make to achieve that growth. At this point, the reason why there's such resistance to tax hikes or any of that is because people feel like we're funding politicians, not beneficiaries ourselves. They see wasteful expenditure and they think, I'm not going to keep bailing out the state. What we need now is a coherent plan, 5% growth, focus on rail and logistics, transitioning our energy, and ensuring that municipalities work to give you water. If we achieve that plan and focus, I think citizens will get behind it and make the sacrifices.
All right, that's Vusi Maimane from Build One South Africa. And right next to him is the ACDP's Steve Swart. I want to bring in then the business sector, Stephen, because in the leaked budget speech, Mr. Khanki Matabane from the Black Business Council, we understand that there's going to be a lot of emphasis on energy infrastructure, water and sanitation, as well as transport and logistics, which have been a problem when you look at the state of our, state-owned enterprises. Are you confident that, firstly, Enoch Godongwana will take to the podium, and just how much can we afford for him not to actually deliver the budget speech?
Thank you very much for having us and welcoming us to Budget 2.0. I think it will be a disaster if that does not happen, because remember, the budget is not only any other document. The budget enables government to start spending. And the financial year of government is starting next month. So government and SOCs and everyone else needs to start planning now. They started planning a long time ago anyway, but they need to concretize their plans now so that government can move on and start working. But we are a bit worried because We've been talking a lot since 1994. We could have won some competition, Olympics, for talking. But where are the actions? And we've been talking about we'll create South Africa and make it like a construction workshop of the world and all those type of things. But those have never happened. But no one is being held accountable. So we're not taking actions, we're not holding people accountable. So everything else becomes rhetoric. So let's stop the rhetoric and start actually doing. Those who are not prepared to do, let's hold them accountable. And we, for example, when it comes to VAT, we won't support the VAT increase as the Black Business Council because it will basically decimate small businesses and black businesses. Because what will then happen when you have additional costs? What you do, you have to increase your own costs, and then you increase your own prices, and then you price yourself out of the market. And what then happens, we're going to then have to retrench people and then increase the unemployment that we have. We already, as we're sitting here, we already have almost 45% unemployment. So increasing that is just going to create a problem for the society. So we need to find a way of cutting costs. Maybe a question to you, do you need deputy ministers?
I mean, we've also spoken to Dr. Padi Lehotla, the former statistician general, who was also speaking about, this issue of reducing our cabinet. It would be marginal, 60 billion rand needed to plug the fiscus. As the Black Business Council, what I want to understand from you, especially since you've mentioned small, medium enterprises, is, where else you believe then, the minister could actually get those funds. There's lots of proposals because at the end of the day, there will be consequences. If you take the 19 billion odd rand from PRASA, for an example, but it means the trains are also going to be affected, which are primarily, servicing the working class. So where is this money supposed to come from? And given how there's just a lack of probably public and even business confidence in the ability and how this money has been managed.
There are other options. Obviously, one option is to stop the wasteful expenditure. The other option is to, let's relook at the corporate tax. The corporate tax is 27%, and it was made to be 27% to encourage investment into South Africa.
Yes.
What you must just then check, for the past 10 years, have you seen investment coming to South Africa? If not, perhaps maybe let's increase the 27% by 1%, make it 28%. Then you'll be able to get some money there that can then plug the challenges of the SRD. We need the SRD because we've got so many people who are poor, who are hungry, who go to bed without food. But we need to balance that also with then say, how do we fund productive initiatives? Like funding of small businesses, because if you fund small businesses will create jobs, and the jobs will be occupied by people who are on the SRD, and then you are basically relieving government from the challenge that they're having, and those people then will be able to pay tax. Then you increase you grow the economy. So we need to be innovative and look at other ways outside of increasing VAT, because that one is going to cripple the economy.
Very quickly, Mr. Matabane, over the years there's been a frayed relationship between business and the government, and it seems though that there's been a concerted effort to actually make amends. The minister, having spoken a lot about private-public partnerships, especially when it comes to this infrastructure development to kickstart economic growth, are you confident that they'll be able to hold that? Because it's sometimes good, it's sometimes bad, and yes, by nature it is going to be tumultuous, but everybody needs to put their shoulders to the wheel now.
Yes, there have been a lot of efforts even from the president himself on making sure that the relationship between government and business improves. The challenge, I think, is that we've been talking about the triple Ps for some time as well. The challenge is the speed. Things are just moving extremely slow, and we don't have that much time. We're in a crisis of unemployment, crisis of revenue, crisis of expenses. We need to try and move with speed, because if we don't move with speed, this trust deficit that we have between business and government will continue, because business have plans. Those plans need to happen as soon as possible. Otherwise, the shareholders are going to say, but maybe we need to look elsewhere for investment. So we need to improve our processes and move much, much faster than we are doing now.
All right, that's Khanke Matabane. He speaks on behalf of the Black Business Council. Lots of conversation as well, Stephen, within the business community about whether or not South Africa has reached a tax inflection point. In other words, you just simply cannot tax citizens any further. And of course, you would have heard from Mr. Matabane about the pace at which things are moving. And that's exactly what South Africans are feeling right now in terms of their cost of living.